where I had my first heartbreak. I still remember how it all changed. My father said, don't you worry, don't you.
Will you please be seated here?
Yep. Yes. Right. Okay.
Space, maybe pull this chair back.
Do we have more seats we actually need?
Yes, we have 4 seats we actually need.
How many more we have? I think we can get away free.
Hello, Stefan. How are you? Very good.
That's correct. I'm just delivering this evening with the commissioner and ambassador.
All right.
So Ambassador Kamau is not yet here?
We'll get ourselves sorted out.
He was supposed to have arrived. So I put you in the trusted hands of my boss. I really don't know where the Ambassador Kamau.
We don't have a name card, so I'm doing.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If you can please take your seats. I'm just quickly going to start with a few housekeeping issues for those that need to find out. There's a conference application that you can download from either the Google Store or the iPhone app. And you can utilize that application throughout the day to access the program. Any changes, you can upload photos. There's quite a number of things that you can do. There's also a small competition running for this application, and the person that makes use of this application the most during the next 3 days will get a small reward at the end. So please try and use as far as possible. Then also we have Wi-Fi connection. The Wi-Fi hotspot name is UN World Forum, and the password is @CapeTown 2017. @CapeTown 2017. The pointer. The pointer. The pointer. Just want to try and get that on the screen for you. That's the last point. I'm not there yet. All right. So there's the Wi-Fi hotspot name and the Wi-Fi password. Then we have several social media platforms. We've got a Twitter account, hashtag UN Data Forum. There's also live streaming of most of the sessions on the undataforum.org website. As you entered this auditorium, you would see that there is an interpretation desk for headsets. Please just use your photo ID and hand that in, and you get your headset and return that after the use. There is tomorrow evening, there's an official gala dinner that you're all invited to. There's just a couple of logistics around that that's quite important. The first is that you need to please make sure that you RSVP. You can do that through the application that you're downloading at the moment, or you can go to the registration desk and scan your barcode for the RSVP. There would be transport from in front of the CTICC at 18:30 tomorrow evening with buses to the venue, and those buses will return you back to the CTICC. Then just lastly, there is a prizes sponsored by MTN for this, and the dinner is also sponsored by MTN. The last thing that I need to say is that you have to scan your barcode when you enter any of the venues. As you enter, it's part of our roll call system, so please make sure that you do scan your barcodes upon entering any venue. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I think you can do better than that. Good morning. We're in Cape Town. It should be a big good morning. It's a beautiful day, gorgeous day. My name is Teresa Clark, and I've been given the very difficult task of managing such a group of luminaries for this morning's session. We actually have two panels to open this session, and we are meant to do this in the course of 90 minutes. We're going to have two panels, and I think you could call this speed talking, is I think what we're going to be asking our speakers to do here. And I'm going to ask them in advance to please not be upset with me when we have to cut you off, because I've been told that this is a big responsibility. We want to make sure we start off the conference on the right foot, and we don't want to get behind when we start with our first panel. So we will be moving very, very quickly. Let me start by telling you a little story. Yesterday, when I arrived in Cape Town, I was picked up by a cab driver who asked me why I was here. And I told him that I was coming to the UN World Data Forum. And he heard the word data. And it was quite interesting to me what that meant to him. He immediately said, "Could you please tell them to reduce the cost of data on my cell phone so I can access the internet more cheaply?" And I said, well, that's not exactly what this conference is about. And so I explained to him that this was a group of statisticians from around the world assembled by the United Nations, that there would be close to 2,000 people here who are responsible for government data, along with representatives from the private sector and NGOs. I wasn't sure if maybe I was going on a little too long for this cab driver. But it was quite interesting because he immediately told me that actually he does cab driving on the side, that he's a PhD student at the University of Cape Town. And so once I explained what this conference was about, he said, well, I want to come back to my original premise. Could you please tell them to reduce the cost of data? And he said, as a student, it's quite expensive to access data. And I look at my colleagues who have studied overseas and think about how they're able to access data and the limitations I have as a student in terms of what the university provides, whereas my friends who are at school in London and in Boston are able to access data from their phones at home, and I just don't have the same access that they have. And he went on to talk about the imbalance between government and private sector in terms of access to data, and whether or not he felt that it was fair, and whether or not he felt that he had the ability to access data in the same way, and he felt that there was an imbalance. So he concluded by telling me, I do hope you go and tell them that the policymakers need to coordinate themselves, and to the extent that we want people to use data, it needs to be cheap and accessible. So I've now done my job, and I have delivered the message from my cab driver to all of you today. And I think that it was a very valid point that policies need to be coordinated, and that if we are talking about access to data, we also need to make sure that it is accessed democratically, which I know is a theme of this conference. And we talk about the point that he made, and it is quite interesting when you think back to George Orwell's novel, 1984. And in that book, which at the time it was published, seemed so forward-thinking, and it seemed as if it was imagining something out of a science fiction movie, that government would have so much data. I don't think that George Orwell ever imagined that we would have the first UN data conference that looks like this, that actually accepts the fact that government has so much information on citizens and beyond. And I think that it's very exciting that we're here, because in many ways, this sort of data and statistics that have been long imagined can actually be used for good. And I think that that's why all of you are here today, and why this conference is being organized, not George Orwell's Orwellian view of how government could use data, but the ways in which data can be used to serve people. So I think that there's one session that we have over the course of this conference that's called Statistics is Sexy. And I actually think that it's bigger than that. I think that this whole conference is sexy. I think that the fact that everyone has come together to look at the goals and objectives in terms of how government, private sector, and NGOs can use data to further advance the development goals of the United Nations is a huge step forward, and something that we should all be very excited about. So with that, we are going to move into our first panel. And we have two panels, and let me just explain a little bit about why we have two panels this morning. The first panel is really intended to lay the groundwork for what we will be talking about in terms of the major themes. We have some very high-level dignitaries who are here to help welcome us all to the conference, first of all, and represent the United Nations, but also to just talk about the changing nature of the data landscape to address the new requirements that reflect the fast development in technology. And so we will hear from our keynote speakers at this moment. And then the second panel is meant to bring it down a little bit more specific to this conference and talk a little bit more about the specific objectives that we hope to get out of the forum. And that's why we have two separate panels. So with no further ado, I'm going to ask Mr. Wu, who is the Undersecretary General of DESET, to start with his first remarks. Mr. Wu?
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, distinguished panelists, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to express once again my sincere thanks to Government South Africa and the Statistics South Africa for co-hosting this very important event. I would like also to thank you, the people sitting here representing the national statistics systems, who spearheaded this important forum, and the program committee members for their hard work and dedications in putting together such very impressive program. Distinguished guests, I sincerely appreciate the numerous partners, international agencies, and donors, as I said yesterday, whose contributions have supported the participation of many speakers and contributors to this gathering. And in particular, the government of China, which is being represented by Commissioner Ning, who is sitting on the podium, for their generous support to this event. The Secretary General's Independent Expert Advisory Group on the Data Revolution for Sustainable Development first proposed the idea for a United Nations World Data Forum. In their 2014 report, A World That Counts, the group recommended to hold a World Forum on sustainable development data every 2 years to bring together the whole data ecosystem to share ideas and experience for data improvements, innovation, advocacy, and technology transfer. The Secretary General asked the United Nations Statistical Commission to develop a roadmap to fully realize the aspiration of the data revolutions advisory group. Under the leadership of the high-level group for partnership, coordination, and the capacity building for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The forum was established as the space to create mechanism to intensify cooperation for data and statistics across various communities, including information technology, geospatial information managers, data scientists, private sector, civil society, and data users. This forum is a unique opportunity for technical and political discussions on the opportunities and the challenges in producing and using information, data, and statistics to facilitate global sustainable development and to ensure progress towards the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This forum takes place at a critical time for strengthening data and statistical capacity around the world. We have begun the second year of implementing the 2030 Agenda, agenda that guide international development efforts and national policy making through 2030. Accurate, reliable, timely, and disaggregated data is essential to achieving the 2030 Agenda's 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Success requires that all communities represented in this room fulfill a critical role and find ways to work together and create partnerships and synergies. The new agenda poses enormous challenges for the global statistical community. It is imperative to modernize, improve capacity, and cooperate at a truly global level. In particular, national statistical offices have a key role to play. They constitute the core of national information systems. They are the institutions responsible for ensuring the production of reliable and high-quality statistics in line with the international standards to ensure data quality and comparability across countries in full alignment with the fundamental principles of official statistics. It is also essential to strengthen national statistical capacities in countries where financial and human resources for statistics are lacking. All national statistical offices should become the new data hubs to gather and provide the necessary data to inform policies and monitor progress. To make this happen, we need governments, international organizations, business, academia, and civil society to join forces and work together. We expect this forum to offer the space for partnerships to be created or strengthened. We look forward to new commitments on strengthening statistical systems and on building a growing consensus on data principles and other policy issues like open data and data privacy. The forum will serve also as a launching pad where diverse data producers and users can get behind the Cape Town Global Action Plan. It was no Global Action Plan only yesterday, for sustainable development data. This plan calls for the full, active, and focused commitment of a government, policy leaders, and the international community to undertake key actions under 6 strategic areas. Number 1, coordination and strategic leadership. Number 2, innovation and the modernization of national statistical systems. Number 3, strengthening of statistical systems. Number 4, dissemination of data on sustainable development. Number 5, building of partnerships. And number 6, that's the last, mobilization of resources. Ladies and gentlemen, I do look forward to the many discussions and partnerships and new initiatives to be presented over the next few days of discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wu. And now we're going to move on to Mr. Michael Gerber, who is the Swiss ambassador for the 2030 Agenda.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Mr. Undersecretary General, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank Statistics South Africa for hosting this conference, and UNDESA, the UN Statistical Commission, as well as the high-level group for partnership coordination and capacity building for statistics for the 2030 Agenda to make this forum possible. It's a great honor and pleasure to speak to you here in Cape Town at this first UN World Data Forum. The adoption of the 2030 Agenda and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, by all 193 UN member states in September 2015 represents an unprecedented consensus among the international community to transform the world towards a more social, ecologically sound, and prosperous future for all of us. The 2030 Agenda very much offers us a new lens through which we look at the world and the urgent problems and challenges we are facing, from hunger and poverty to climate change, inequality, environmental crisis, and securing peace. However, a new lens alone is not enough to make change happen. It's just as important to have the right means and tools at hand in order to guide action on the SDGs and to measure progress as we follow the path to a more sustainable future. Therefore, it has always been a priority for Switzerland to put a strong focus on the follow-up and review of the 2030 Agenda. And in this context, the issue of data has, fortunately, received high attention. The high-level political forum in 2016 presented already a stage for the statistics community to demonstrate the progress that has been achieved in this field, and a great opportunity for dialogue with decision makers from across the globe. Switzerland very much values this exchange and will thus again advocate for an official session on statistics at the HLPF 2017 this coming summer. The increased attention data has gained is absolutely necessary, as we have known for a long time, not least since the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, that the data used by policymakers is simply not good enough to advance sustainable development for everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, to illustrate the necessity for collaboration between policy and statistics experts, I deem worthwhile to briefly recall some of the central principles for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, as they have far-reaching implications for both concerned groups. First of all, looking through the 2030 Agenda lens means we take a holistic approach that integrates all three dimensions of sustainable development in a balanced way. One could say that such an agenda is too complex to be implemented, but in my view, it simply reflects reality and it challenges us to find new ways of thinking and working together. It is clear, however, that such an integrated agenda entails trade-offs between individual targets, but also an enormous potential that can be harnessed by using synergies in a smart manner. In order to achieve progress on all three dimensions of sustainable development, it is vital for policymakers to understand these trade-offs and synergies that accompany the implementation. Therefore, measuring and monitoring policy interaction across sectors will strengthen the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Sound and good quality data will help make informed decisions and ultimately increase policy coherence for sustainable development. This leads me to the second central principle of implementation. Looking through the 2030 Agenda lens, we see the whole world. The 2030 Agenda is a universal agenda. Unlike the MDGs, it requires all countries in the North and the South to strive for real transformation and to achieve the set targets. But this will only be possible if stakeholders at all levels of governance and across sectors work together. Monitoring progress towards the SDGs is a task that first and foremost involves national governments with their national statistical offices, as Mr. Wu stated just now, but also subnational governments, international organizations, the private sector, research institutions, and civil society. While there is a great need for multi-level and multi-stakeholder partnerships between these actors, there is also a potential risk for coordination failure. In order to prevent an ineffective and costly proliferation of indicators and monitoring requirements that undermine priority setting, coordination is vital at all levels. But there is also need for coordination between the different levels, first and foremost levels of government within states, to ensure that context-specific progress can be monitored, for example, by strengthening data collection capacities at subnational levels. Ladies and gentlemen, data quality is of utmost importance if we want to meet the ambitious and the SDGs. Looking through the 2030 Agenda lens means making sure that no one is left behind. This third central principle I would like to recall is not just a catchy slogan for the whole 2030 Agenda. It really represents a groundbreaking paradigm shift in international development with strong implications for the statistics community. The leaving no one behind principle is the ultimate call for action to reduce inequalities everywhere. It clearly states that we cannot afford any longer to let the needs of the poorest and most vulnerable be obscured by progress we make on average. Unlike the MDGs, the SDGs require us to be more accurate, more nuanced, more innovative, and more collaborative. This applies to the design of evidence-based policies, as well as to measuring progress. Without better disaggregated data, we will fail to do so. Narrowing gaps in data availability and quality is thus crucial to turn ambition into reality. This requires investments and long-term commitment to support capacity building, particularly in government statistical offices. Ladies and gentlemen, we usually tend to only treasure what we can measure. In the context of implementing the 2030 Agenda, this saying would mean to me to find ways to inform integrated policymaking and to measure progress towards the goals and targets in an unprecedented quality. Several successful collaborations with regard to the 2030 Agenda already exist at regional level, for example in Europe in the context of the UNECE, or at national level in my own country, for example between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Federal Office for Statistics. These examples have shown that including statisticians in a policy dialogue with different stakeholders early in the process is absolutely key to advance implementation. This will not save politicians from making hard choices, but we should not miss any opportunity to make sure that they base their decisions on evidence. In a so-called post-factual world in which political decisions are being taken nowadays, this principle becomes even more important. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said before, the 2030 Agenda offers us a new lens through which we can look at the world and the many interconnected challenges we are facing on the way to a more sustainable future. I am confident that if we all keep using this lens, and if we align our measures and activities accordingly, we will indeed see a more sustainable world in 2030. I wish you all many inspiring exchanges throughout these days, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gerber. We will now hear from Ambassador Kamau from the Office of the President of the General Assembly.
Thank you very much. Looks like I arrived just in the nick of time. I should recognize all those who are at the table, all protocols observed. It's a wonderful pleasure to be sitting next to the Undersecretary General of the United Nations and next to Ambassador Gerber, who you just heard from, and other colleagues who are here. Today I'm here in my capacity as the Special Envoy for the President of the General Assembly, Ambassador Peter Thompson, who unfortunately could not be here, but we agreed that I would come and represent him at the meeting today. For those of you who know me, I used to do a little bit of work on the SDGs and the 2030 Agenda a few years ago. But let me read the statement that has been prepared for me today on behalf of Ambassador Peter Thompson. It gives me great pleasure to deliver this statement on behalf of the President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Ambassador Peter Thompson. And let me begin by expressing my regrets that prior commitments have prevented Ambassador Thompson from being here today. Allow me also to congratulate the United Nations Statistical Commission. It's a high-level group, as well as the government of South Africa, on respectively covering and hosting this United Nations Data Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, this forum comes at a very critical time in our world. Perhaps for the first time in history, the decision we take over the next 14 years will not only affect the lives of today's generation, but will have a real impact on those future generations as well. With the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the 193 members of the United Nations have identified the path that we must all take to do right by our citizens, our planet, and our grandchildren. By following this master plan, and the 2030 Agenda is a master plan for a better world, not only can we make good our commitment to the most vulnerable on our promises to deliver peace and justice, but we can unleash a wave of opportunity and growth that is good for people, prosperity, and the common home upon which we all depend. But let me be clear. Time is not on our side. The parents who see their children die from entirely preventable causes, and there are literally millions on this world, cannot wait any longer for us to make the progress that we need to make. The woman who faces discrimination at home, at school, as a girl, or in the workforce cannot wait any longer. She too needs action to happen now. The youth who are lounging by the roadside, unemployed, cannot wait any longer. Moreover, our biodiversity, ecosystems, and our oceans, which are already suffering from irreparable damage, not least from the effects of climate change, most certainly cannot wait any longer. For this reason, I have made generating solid momentum on implementation of each and every sustainable goal the singular focus of my team as President of the General Assembly. Momentum, however, must come from all of us, and that, of course, includes those operating in the data world. In and on behalf itself, data will not deliver the 2030 Agenda or the Paris Climate Change Agreement. But clearly, our ability to transform the world for the better is directly linked to our ability to generate, use, and learn from high-quality data at all levels. Timely, accessible, and good quality data and information informs the nature and quality of decisions, as well as the policies of governments at all levels. At the global level, a sound and widely accepted set of indicators and adequate data to monitor implementation is critical to the recently agreed framework for SDGs follow-up and review, not least the high-level political forum. It is also critical for the world outside of government, whose participation in this transformation is essential. Here, data is about citizen empowerment, economic opportunity, and public accountability. It is also about identifying priorities, targeting solutions, and reporting on successes and challenges. Whatever the purpose, however, the momentum challenge for the data community is clear, and it is a momentous challenge. Finalizing the SDG indicators framework and support each other to get SDG data flowing quickly and thoroughly throughout the systems that process this information. In this regard, I commend the UN Secretary General's Independent Expert Advisory Group for their report entitled A World That Counts. In addition to their insightful recommendations, allow me to share a number of complementary actions for your consideration. First, I believe we must develop data and statistic platforms at local and national levels on Sustainable Development Goals implementation that are harmonized and standardized enough to allow comparisons and evaluation of progress, and that are open for broad utilization to support transparency and accountability. Second, we must engage reliable providers and producers of data and statistics, including companies, civil society groups, academic institutions, foundations, and citizens, in the elaboration of national plans and policies related to collection, management, and exploitation of information on Sustainable Development Goals implementation. And third, we must address the critical issue of inequality and the exclusion of marginalized people from access to appropriate data and information. Similarly, we must ensure that data collection and use is disaggregated to ensure that policy prescriptions appropriately target each category in line with our commitment to leave no one behind. And finally, to achieve all of the above, and given the data collection and use requires knowledge, infrastructure, capacity, technology, and of course, resources, we must urgently strengthen cooperation and collaboration at all levels. Recognizing the challenge faced by the most vulnerable countries, we need an effective global partnership to build data capacities and exchange best practices around data as a global good, a global public good. We must be wary of privatization of data in a manner that denies it its exploitation for public good. Excellencies, as President of the General Assembly, I'm working on a number of key initiatives across each of the Sustainable Development Goals, and I invite you to join me in making these initiatives a success. In a few days, I will be hosting the first ever conference on sustainable peace and sustainable development. Peace and development go hand in glove, and like with everything else, we need data, information, and knowledge on how we can build greater peace in our world in order to secure sustainable development. The Ocean Conference, another example, taking place in New York from 5th to 9th June 2017. It constitutes a unique opportunity to reverse the cycle of decline in the status of our oceans. As you may know, there are considerable data and knowledge gaps with respect to maritime pollution and the precise scope of the impacts of acidification on the marine environment. These are holding back our attainment of SDG 14. I look forward to your support and ideas on how best we can overcome this challenge. The challenge is broad as it is deep. For all the 17 goals and 169 targets, we need the best, timely, and most accurate data we can generate. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to thank the organizers for the opportunity to share with you these few thoughts, and I wish you a successful forum and encourage all of you to consider how you and your networks can deliver the momentum we need to get the Sustainable Development Goals transformation firmly underway. I thank you very much, end quote.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kamau. We're now going to move to Jacob Mamabolo, who is a member of the Executive Committee for Infrastructure and Development in the Gauteng province here in South Africa. Mr. Mamabolo.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. The United Nations Under Secretary General and all officials of the United Nations, Dr. Padile Hota, our Statistician General, panelists, guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you very much. I'm going to share with you what I consider a very practical and concrete experience of what the use of data can do to change and transform living conditions of our people in a province of Gauteng. But first, let me add my voice to sincerely welcome you and appreciate your presence in our country. Let me also just say to you that we are the provincial government of Gauteng, which is geographically the smallest province, but yet the most powerful and leading economic hub of our country. And we are inspired and driven by the vision of transformation, modernization, and re-industrialization of our province. In our Provincial Department of Infrastructure Development, a portfolio for which I'm responsible, I can say, in line with the theme of this particular session, that we have made remarkable strides and good progress to leverage, to harness, to apply smart technologies and systems with business intelligence capabilities to deliver and drive infrastructure development. I'm deeply honored and privileged to unveil and announce that just as we concluded the year, ourselves and Statistics South Africa, led by our very most humble, celebrated personality, our Statistician General, we concluded a very good and important partnership, and this partnership is such that Statistics South Africa will be assisting us as a provincial department to enhance the quality, reliability, and integrity, and data or information to ensure that we improve the lives of our people and that we account for every cent that the taxpayer allocate to us to deliver infrastructure. Stats SA will certainly assist us and will be supporting us to ensure that we have data and information so that none of the cent or money allocated for development is diverted through malpractices such as corruption and others. Now, distinguished guests and delegates, you will be pleased to know that this partnership with Stats SA followed our decision as a provincial department to establish what we call an Infrastructure NEF Center, otherwise known as Lutsinga Infrastructure House. And let me just say to you, Lutsinga, it's a Venda word, and Venda is one of our local languages mainly spoken in the far north of our country, and it means NEV, hence we call our infrastructure house, our one-stop technology house, Lutsinga Infrastructure House. It is a room fitted with capabilities that allow us to be able to use data and information to deliver our infrastructure. Now, if there was time, I could go into each one of those, but let me say that since we unveiled and launched Lutsinga Infrastructure House, we are able to attend to some of the key challenges that faces our country and province. Many of you might be aware that our National Development Plan has identified infrastructure development to grow the economy, to create jobs, and to make sure that we change the spatial legacy of national oppression and colonialism. Now, secondly, we have successfully managed to turn around the issues pertaining to institutional and organizational culture, and to this extent, we're making a positive impact on improving the management, particularly project management practices, paradigms, and just how our officials and managers are working. Let me conclude by assuring you, very important delegates, distinguished guests, that with the use of technology, smart systems, and of course the use of data and information, we are cracking the code of infrastructure delivery and making sure that we improve the living conditions of each one of our citizens in our very much important province. And if Gauteng does not perform on infrastructure delivery, it will have a very negative impact on the rest of our country. And that is why we can celebrate with you and confirm in practice that using data and information can make a tremendous positive impact on the living conditions of the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mamabolo. We're going to move now to Mr. Ning Zhizhe, who is the Commissioner for the National Bureau of Statistics of China. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman. Respected guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my great pleasure to attend the UN World Data Forum. The topic is of great significance. The attendants are very important. On behalf of the National Bureau of Statistics of China, NBS of China, I would like to thank Dr. Polly Lihler and Statistics South Africa for hosting and inviting me to come here. I would also like to thank Mr. Wu Hongbo, the UN Under-Secretary General, and Mr. Stephen Swifest. He sits downstairs. The UNSD Director, for their tremendous and fruitful work for the success of this forum. 4 months ago, they went to China to attend the Global Preparative Seminar held in Guilin, which paved way for the forum. Today, I would like to talk about the Chinese story of better data for green development, since 3 points as follows. Point 1, green development has already become the new concept and the new practice in the Chinese modelizing construction. Chinese culture with 5,000 years history always value harmony between people and nature and respect nature. There was an old Chinese saying that a man is an integral part of nature. Now, China takes sustainable development as national strategy, takes construction of ecological civilization as major task, takes conservation of environment and saving resources as a fundamental national policy, and vigorously promotes clean growth, cycle development, and low-carbon development. Green waters and mountains are gold and silver mines has been deeply seated in Chinese people's mind. In 2016, the evaluation and assessment methods for ecological civilization construction objectives and green development indicator system were issued. In the past 25 years, the results has been shown. In 2015, China's energy consumption per unit of GDP dropped by 59.2% comparing with 1990. From 2003 to 2013, forest coverage rate had an increase of 3.4 percentage points to 21.6%. Point 2, China has made positive progress in better data of green development progress. The Embassy of China has done a lot of work in this respect. Firstly, we have set up a series of energy resources and environmental statistical system. Secondly, we have carried out the climate change statistics. Thirdly, we issued the pilot plan for compiling natural resource balance sheets and its guideline. Fourthly, we completed the Green Development Indicator System containing 56 indicators covering energy use, environmental governance, environmental quality, ecological protection, growth quality, green life, and public satisfaction. Point 3 is one of the priorities for China to harness the power of data for green development. With 9.6 million square kilometers land, 1.38 billion population, over 11 trillion US dollars GDP, China shoulders heavy tasks to leave no one behind. The MBS of China will speed up the formulation of sound program and integrate the evaluation system for green development. Firstly, we will improve the resource and environment statistical standards and energy statistics. Secondly, we will carry out a public opinion survey on satisfaction of environmental quality to address the issue of air quality, drinking water, and treatment and sewage, hazardous waste and garbage. We will combine the physical accounts for major types of natural resources and assets, and explore ways to conduct nature capital accounting and ecological service value accounting. Thirdly, we will actively strengthen international cooperation in sustainable development. In 2016, China released China's National Plan on implementation of the 2030 Agenda. China made a commitment to continue to work with the United Nations on a project of statistical capacity development in China and other developing countries, participate in the improvement of global SDG indicator framework. with aim to promote the sharing of great development data by people all over the world. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a world that counts. The sustainable development of human beings depends on statistics. The Chinese government and the Embassy of China will be committed to our promises, fulfill international obligations, and make the contribution to the cause of global sustainable development. I wish the forum a great success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jose. And now we will move to our last speaker on this panel, and that is Mr. Clint Brown of ESRI.
Thank you very much. Distinguished panel, esteemed moderator, delegates, I'm one of you. I'm a former statistician, actually, 20 years sober. I work on building technology, GIS technology, and I can't help but be amazed at the set of global goals that have been developed. I think they're far-reaching, I think they're innovative, I think they're visionary, and we think there's many aspects to this, many themes, they're cross-cutting, but they're also integrated. To work on any of these problems, you need to know about some of the other initiatives as well. They need to be based on a multitude of measures by all of the good work that you do in your agencies, building systems of record. But it's also about connecting communities and finding ways for us to reach across those communities, to find ways to collaborate and work together. At ESRI, we believe pretty strongly that GIS provides a really important framework for addressing and achieving these global goals. We know that GIS provides kind of a fundamental language for understanding, a framework for organizing all of the content around these global goals. GIS does this by organizing information as a set of layers of all types for all areas of the world that can be visualized, analyzed, and most interestingly, combined together, integrated to help us understand the nuance of a lot of the issues that we face in this future development. And simply put, maps have become a new medium for communication, for collaboration, and for understanding. Sometimes just seeing things in a map helps you make better decisions. And we think GIS helps to integrate not just your own data, but others' data as well. This ability to bring all kinds of sciences together in one display becomes really important. This is really what GIS is all about. Today, GIS is used by over 350,000 organizations worldwide. These organizations build data around a lot of the same themes, the same categories of information that are articulated in the global goals. Every single global goal has GIS work that is associated by many, many agencies globally, in every country, in every locale. For example, if we just take a look at poverty, there's many cases, or health and education. Ebola, the ability to fight Ebola was both a combination of healthcare protocol and public health approaches applied by the World Health Organization, who also used GIS to monitor and to find out how to get ahead of the disease in those maps. So we see GIS being used in a lot of these very initiatives at this time already. And that work will continue to happen. Interestingly, we think GIS provides a kind of framework for how to process and achieve these global goals. It starts with individual organizations collecting data. That's what many of you do. You're dedicated to your particular country or your locale for collecting data about certain themes of information, certain categories of information. That data in turn can be brought together with many other organizations, kind of integrated as a set of layers in a GIS. And it's not just the ability to overlay that information, it's the ability to apply very deep analytics and analysis to that information. Things like space-time modeling, things like the most advanced statistical operators that we can apply, really to derive information that enables us to address these global goals and to move forward. That ability to understand and gain insight about problems also provides a way for us to engage on delivering solutions to those problems. How do we plan? How do we make decisions about moving forward? How do we involve people who will be affected by or benefited by these various goals is really important. This notion of understanding problems is really interesting because understanding precedes action, and we think GIS provides the framework for doing that. So GIS provides this ability for each of your organizations to build and work on and be dedicated to your own system of record. Those systems of record come together in a global GIS, in a system of engagement, and then analytics help provide that system of insight. This ability to integrate everything becomes vital for the success of this work. GIS also connects everyone. It connects citizens, individual people. It connects communities of all kinds, sometimes physical communities, but other times communities that are interested in particular outcomes or particular domains. And it's also about connecting across organizations. So we think GIS has a critical role to play also in engaging citizens in the process of achieving these global goals within the next decade. ESRI has been fortunate to work with a number of organizations on things like the global goals and sustainable development. We continue to do that with various NGOs, with the UN, with organizations in each of your countries. We remain dedicated to supporting you and to understanding what we can do to develop technology that will bring your information to life and to help you make a difference in the world. Thanks very much.
Distinguished panelists, thank you very much for opening this session with such insight and wisdom. One more round of applause, please. Okay, I see we have a very well-organized second panel that is making its way up here.
Do you have a seating order?
Okay, so we're moving right along. And as mentioned before, the purpose of this panel discussion is to address the specific objectives of this UN World Data Forum. And for this purpose, we have 4 speakers: Professor Enrico Giovanni, who is the chair of the IEAG on the Data Revolution. We have Ms. Gabriela Vukovic, who is the president of the Hungarian Central Statistical Authority and member of the IEAG. We have Mr. Stefan Schweinfest, who is the Statistician General for Statistics South Africa. No, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. They switched seats on me, okay? I have to tell you. Patty, you were actually supposed to sit where Stefan is, so my notes got a little bit confused, but I know who's who. We have Mr. Stefan Schweinfest, who is the director of the UN Statistics Division. Thank you very much, Stefan. And next to him, we have Mr. Patty Lahola, who is the Statistician General for Statistics South Africa, so please excuse me. Okay, so Professor Giovanni, can I ask you to start with just a couple of thoughts with respect to what you think the participants in this conference should be taking away?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Of course, it's a great pleasure to be here and see one of the recommendations we made in the World That Counts report happening. By the way, we didn't recommend to have a World Statistics Forum, but a World Data Forum. Because one of the points we made in the report is that data is much more than statistics. Data are able not only to monitor what's going on towards sustainable development, but data can help in achieving sustainable development. So my first remark is that, as I said, I'm very glad that this is happening. I think that for future events, we can not switch the focus, but integrate more this idea that data are very important to achieve sustainable development. And we made a recommendation to the UN Secretary General that the UN should cover much more these kind of issues beyond statistics, because, as we said, data today is an asset, and assets need to be managed. Just comparing where we were in November 2014 when we published this report and where we are now, it's clear that the international statistical system, and not only, are doing a lot to move towards SDGs monitoring. But the question is, are we doing enough and at right pace? And here, my answer is no, unfortunately not. For example, the selection of indicators was done in a remarkable quick way. Compared to past experience, we have really to recognize the capacity of the UN Statistical Commission and the experts to draw the list of indicators in a very, very fast way. But on the collection of indicators, dissemination of indicators, and also the development of analytical tools in order to get some sense out of these indicators, we have to recognize that others are doing much better. 2 examples. Yesterday, when I arrived in Cape Town, I wanted to change some money. And so I went to the desk at the airport. And I gave my passport, and the lady started typing my information, scanned the passport. This is not the immigration, this is a bank. And she said, oh, you are a former minister. What? And I said, how do you know that? And she said that the system is telling me that you were a minister. Wow. I don't know where they got this information, maybe in Wikipedia or whatever, but this is remarkable. Of course, they were not trying to sell me any service but the exchange of currency. But this is a great example of mashing up information, not necessarily, let's say, secret information. At least I didn't realize that was secret. June 2016, PricewaterhouseCoopers, at the meeting we had the Prince of Wales Foundation in London, They presented their database, the analytical tool that they are now selling to all enterprises in the world for $5,000 in order as a hook to sell services. And this database and analytical tool is about SDGs. It's quite remarkable what they have done, much faster than what statisticians are doing. Of course, they are claiming that they have data for 2015, so they focus on the next 15 years. Of course, they don't have data for 2015, but the way in which they developed such an analytical tool is really remarkable. And we are still struggling, and I know that Stefan is putting a lot of effort on having a database at country level. So my key question is, are statistical offices really changing dramatically, as we said in the report, the way in which they look at data revolution for sustainable development? We urge the UN member states and systems organizations to dramatically speed up their work in this field. Have you dramatically changed the pace? That is the fundamental question. And in the second round, I will try to indicate just a few examples of where we can invest more, but let me just conclude with one comparison between what Netherlands has done, what CBS has done. If you go on the website of the Statistical Office of CBS, you find featured box. The first one is SDGs. And they have put together both official data and some non-official data. They were able to put together 129 indicators out of 192. Eurostat, the Italian statistical offices, they have put together some data. Eurostat published an interesting publication, but there is no database attached. The Italian Statistical Office put together 66 indicators in Excel and PDF files, no database. So and I stop here, as now, as I established in Italy, the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development, so I'm in the user side, I have to say that at least in Europe, notwithstanding some great experiences, we haven't done this shift towards SDGs. And so my first point is that we should do it. On Saturday, we were in a meeting with the Pope, a group of 60 people from private sector, public sector, and so on. And the way in which he urged all of us to move forward resonates with what we heard from the President of the General Assembly. The time is short and is already over for a lot of people. So I think that the first message is that we have to dramatically speed up our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Gabriella, would you like to share your opening thoughts with us?
Yes, thank you. We are short of time, so maybe I will just come to the point immediately. I fully agree with what Enrico said, and it was a good start to say that we need to speed up. But we also need to be cautious about how we speed up and in which direction we go when we speed up. I think the SDGs is a unique opportunity for official statistics in the sense that it channels many of our development and many of our transformation agenda thoughts and the directions into which we should be developing statistics. Certainly timeliness is one of the essential elements that we need to consider. Relevance also. Relevance is more or less provided by following the SDGs and by producing the indicators that were set up, that were developed in the indicator framework. But I think that we need really to be very sure that the data we produce are of high quality. And there is always problem of producing timely data, high quality data, there is a contradiction between timeliness and quality at a certain level. So I think that while we really need to speed up and while we really need to produce as many indicators as we can in as short a time as we can, we really need to think about what quality we can produce. And here, when we were talking in the data revolution expert group about what kind of data we can use in official statistics, one of the problems was that it's very difficult to identify which are the best input data that we can use from that data deluge that we see in the world. So we need to harness, and we talked a lot about, I think maybe in the subtitle, harnessing the data revolution was also mentioned in our report, that we need to harness the data revolution, we need to harness that enormous amount of data, we need to be relevant, we need to find the best, most efficient, most quality-oriented ways of using the data, and not just go into speed and not just try to speed up our efforts, which doesn't mean that we don't need to speed up, as I mentioned. The quality is essential for the data to be used at the best way, but quality is also essential when we think about the principles that we need to observe. In official statistics, we need to experiment, but only before producing the data. And once we start producing the data, there is no much room for experiments. We really need to produce data that are always accompanied by metadata. We need to produce data that when observing certain principles, UN principles for official statistics, fundamental principles of official statistics, we need to observe other standardization requirements, legal requirements, which maybe are also a constraint in our work, but certainly a constraint for public good. Since we are producing public good, we need to be sure that we observe all these principles. And in the report, The World That Counts, we also talked about data principles, which as a recommendation to develop data principles that are not only observed by official statisticians, but also all the other data producers out in the world, be it private sector or civil sector, civil service or NGO sector, because the observance of the development and the observance of those principles will really be a key issue in ensuring the credibility of the data, the reliability of the producer and the credibility of the data, and therefore the usefulness also of the data. So I think while we do feel this kind of urge, we really need to be cautious, or at least wise, when we go ahead to make sure that the data we produce are really relevant, timely, of high quality, and really the best data that we can produce for all the users who use our data. And thank you for the first instance.
Thank you. Thank you both for holding to time, and I should mention that we would like to be able to take a question or two at the end of this session. So if you have a question, please start preparing it. In the meantime, let's move on to Stephen Schweinfest. We'll give you your original title back as the Director of the UN Statistics Division. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I had a carefully prepared statement on my 17 years as Chief Statistician of South Africa. In the interest of time, I'll focus on one or two key points. Number one, I mean, Enrico asked us to speed up, and I think this is a very legitimate request. I think we were already speeding up within this first panel this morning. We started at 9 o'clock with the support of our policy directors, so we're setting the frame. And I think after the three first introductions, which basically showed us what we need in the future. We already heard a little bit of what the challenges are at the regional level here in South Africa, what the challenges are in one case at the country level, and what in the private sector context the contributions can be. So already there was a little arch, and then here in this panel now, after the very high level politics of the first panel, we are now in the low level, oh, sorry, did I say, of statistics. I mean, taking it down to the earth and seeing what we can really contribute. And so I just wanted to draw your attention to one point that struck me yesterday, and it has to do with putting order in things or classifying things, as that's what statisticians like to do. I was looking at the themes of the report of the Independent Expert and Advisory Group, and it was a global consensus on principles, technology and innovation, resources for capacity, leadership, and some quick wins. And then I was looking at the classification of our World Data Forum that we have, and we have 6 themes here. And this is new approaches to capacity development for metadata, innovation in data sources, leaving nobody behind, understanding the world through data, data principles and governance and the way forward. And if you now put a third classification next to that, which is the Global Action Plan, which also has a number of themes, you will see an arch. And I think this is very important to say this, because I think it means that we are really in the middle of a dialogue, and that the recommendations of the expert group have certainly been heard. They have become the organizing principle of this event, which is very important. And they are the blueprint, because after this event is over, when we organize a big event, my first question is always, what happens the day after? What do we take into the future? And I think here the connection with the future is the Global Action Plan. And I think that organizing principle is going to be very important for all of us, because the design of the Global Action Plan is such that we put a vision out there with I call it our global to-do list, and we would hope that everybody in this room goes away and says, I have a contribution to make, and here is a space for me, and I think here I can make a contribution, and then we can help manage this, put the people together who can work on this. So I think this is a very fundamental principle. You realize we statisticians like fundamental principles under which we operate. And sometimes I think it's all awfully complex and complicated, but perhaps then sometimes when you step back, it isn't if you look at the larger picture. I think we all know that the information requirements have tremendously increased. We all, I hope, know and agree that the national statistical offices and national statistical systems, who have for years and years and years provided the information basis, have to be at the center of a future data universe, but they also have to be dialoguing with others and increasing the universe of data, but in order to satisfy this increased demand. But there has to be some order, there have to be some rules, there have to be some principles. And I think this is fundamentally accepted. And I think this event is really all about that, bringing these data stakeholder groups together and starting a hopefully fast dialogue of how do we build this new national data architecture. This is my favorite word, because I think we need a national data architecture that produces information at different levels to support decision-making at different levels. And I stop here, and we can elaborate this certainly a lot more during the coming days.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And now we'll hear from the Statistician General of Statistics South Africa, Padi Lehola. Thank you.
Statistician General of South Africa. Before you exchanged our roles, Madam Chair, we had said with Stefan, we are actually a package. So whichever way you label us, it doesn't matter. So you put that paid. Ambassador Kamau is here in front of us, and I remember Jacqueline Matlade of UNEP and I and Jose from Ecuador were hauled into a meeting in UN, and Ambassador Mamabolo was chairing the session and talking about indicators. We were having the Statistics Commission, and we had to go and talk there. Ambassador Kamau made the statement that I'll never forget, and I prefer that statement differently. He said, statisticians will remember you. I prefer not to be forgotten, rather than to be remembered. And he said, we'll remember you for letting us down at our moment of greatest need. And at that point, as statisticians, we are thinking that we'll have a commission, UNGA will make its decisions, and then we'll come up with our architect of statistics. Unfortunately, the pressure was so hot that we had to make sure that we don't get remembered, but at least we get not forgotten. And I think as we move, we have to understand that we prefer not to be forgotten rather than to be remembered. And I think at the speed at which we are moving, we will not be forgotten. As far as Africa was concerned, we had a very sad situation when we were at the Statistics Commission in 2015. We are not ready. I mean, we made a very poor showing as Africa. It was deplorable, to say the least. We came back as Africans and said we have to get our act together on these indicators because other regions were a little bit ahead of us, quite far ahead of us. And we got our act together. My colleagues are here. Bar is here from Cote d'Ivoire, and we worked together. We worked so hard. When we first had the meeting of the subcommittee of the high-level group, we didn't only have the indicators, but we had costed what it will be to run the indicator framework for Africa. So we really heeded your call, Ambassador Kamau, and complied. So it was quite excruciating, but then having done that, the AU said, why do you do this and not do it for the AU? Agenda 2063. So we had to come back again to deal with Agenda 2063. So we aligned both the AU and the what will I say about data? Data is raw material, and that is why it is important to talk about data forum, not statistical forum, because you cannot have statistics without data. It's impossible, completely impossible. So we need data in order to have statistics, and therefore the data forum looks at that hierarchy of data as a raw material and statistics as something processed. We have also to bear in mind that data is non-rival. Many at times think that they can make money out of data. It can't be, because data is non-rival. You can have it, I can have it, but once I have this bottle of water, you can't have it. And we have to understand that fundamental principle that data cannot be for sale. It is a public property that is non-rival. It must be available to everybody all at the same time. Absolutely important. And that is why the private interest and the public interest fail to converge. We need to deal with that. And that is why the principles have to be clear. Of course, we need statistical leadership. We cannot proceed with this without statistical leadership. A lot of us as statisticians work and prefer to work in rarefied environments without interacting with politicians. Unfortunately, the time has come that we have been catapulted to the high table, and we have to be able to deal with that. We need to coordinate through standardization. Coordination is a must, and it's not just coordination by talking, it's coordination through standardization. If the rail line is not the same rail line measured that way, then there'll be catastrophe for trains to run. That's why you need coordination in statistics through standardization. Absolutely critical. And then, of course, we have to separate property interests from evidence. Very, very crucial. You can't be interested in the data. Look at, we have seen how Volkswagen has been, we've seen how Lehman behaved. If you read that the Devil's Casino, you'll see what was happening there. There was interest in money and interest in manipulating the data. Those two things have to be separated as a fundamental principle. We need legislative reform, taking into account the SDGs in statistics offices, and we need to adhere to the United Nations fundamental principles of official statistics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being so timely. All right, so we're going to take a few questions, and I'm going to take three to start with, and in order to make sure that we get to hear from as many people as possible. I don't think that we have a microphone available, so I'm going to start with you here, and if you could stand up and speak very loudly towards me, I will repeat your question. Oh, there is a microphone. Fantastic. Thank you. Then I don't have to repeat your question. Even better. Thank you.
I think there's a microphone.
Yes, there's a microphone.
Hello.
Please.
My name is Nenna Wakama. I'm the Africa Regional Coordinator for the World Wide Web Foundation. And I probably must be related to the cab driver who brought you here, because I normally introduce myself as Nenna from the internet. And I would like us to reflect on digital citizenship, which is one of the things that we are centered upon as the Web Foundation. And I would like us to think more about what the cab driver asked us to do, and that is empower ourselves for the data revolution. Because without affordable internet access, there wouldn't be a digital revolution, which in itself, it's the motherboard for a data revolution. In as much as we want data to be a people's thing, a common, we want it to be open and available, we still believe that if citizens cannot embrace it, use it, create, then we would not get to where we want to be. So my point in getting up is very simple. Digital citizens are data citizens, and data citizens are affordably connected citizens. I think you might have noticed that the Wi-Fi we have here goes up and down. And so I'm using data, my data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, right here.
I'm Buthaina.
It's working.
I'm Buthaina Ghanem from the WHO Palestine office. First of all, allow me to express my excitement and happiness to be in this beautiful city, Cape Town. And I would like to thank all organizers for this well-organized and huge forum. So now back to the session, I would like to thank all the speakers for the valuable input and what I have seen actually as a cross-cutting message, the importance of quality, accurate, relevant data for policy formulation, decision-making, and then strategic planning. So let me share my observations since I arrived here. I met most of the people I met, they were statisticians, but to tell you the truth, I'm missing the policymakers and the decision makers where we see always, and we think that this interaction between data producers and users is very important because still we are facing a big challenge to ensure this integration. So I'm afraid my observation might be wrong, but I'm afraid this can be an indicator that still the policymakers and the decision makers, they don't reach a level where they recognize very well the importance of evidence, timely data for formulating policies and to improve services in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The gentleman here.
Good morning, colleagues. I'm Dimitri Sanga from the ECA. First, let me thank the panelists for a very insightful beginning. We talked, some of them talked about the speed, they talked about quality of the data, but I would like maybe to reflect on the magnitude of the work that we have to do. If we look back at the MDGs, we only had 8 goals. We had 60 indicators to deal with. Now we are moving to 17 goals, and we are talking about 169 targets and more than 230 indicators. So there's an issue of scaling up the work that we are doing. As far as Africa is concerned, beyond the SDGs, we also have another framework, which is Agenda 2063. So in terms of magnitude, we will have to do more and more. So I would like the panelists maybe to tell us, why do they think that this time around we will get it right with more indicators than the 60 that we have? Thanks.
Well, I think that's a very good question for us to end on. Thank you very much. So I'm going to turn back to our panel and ask each of you to respond to that question, and this will wrap up our discussion. So can we start with you, Enrico?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, if this is the challenge, there is no way that statistical offices can do everything by themselves. That is the key message that we try to convey also with the report. Of course, they must be in the driving seat, but they have to engage private sector, universities, and so on and so forth, NGOs, and without them, there is no way to mobilize enough resources for that. So my key message, just rereading also the report, in my view, is that there are 4 points that, in my view, are particularly important in terms of recommendations not yet really implemented. First, principles for non-official statistics, as Gabriela said. I've been pushing for this for a lot of time, and I think that we must have them because the private sector is moving very quickly. So unless we do it, if we don't do that, we will lose the opportunity. Second, mobilize universities and NGOs. As I said, in Italy we have established this Alliance for Sustainable Development with more than 140 organizations, but also we established the network of universities for sustainable development, 60 universities. And now we are mobilizing all data scientists and so on and so forth to try to help us in generating even more data and analytics. Third, SDG Data Lab. That was one of the recommendations in our report, a global SDG Data Lab, in order to bring together the best practices, and we will see a lot of them these days, but they are not visible also at political level. So in my view, this could be a way to speed up, but we also have to know that we already entered into this post-truth politics.
Thank you.
And this is a very complicated story, I have to say, because we have to engage media right now. And so the fourth recommendation would be to establish the data users SDGs data forum that we had proposed, especially focusing on media. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for opening the response to this very good question on which we can end. And Gabriela, Stefan, and Patty, I ask you if you could give us a 60-second response to this question.
Yes, I think why we are here, that is why we are here, to try to find the ways to cope with this enormous challenge of producing high-quality indicators for all the SDGs, and to make sure that we can manage this situation with more indicators than at the time of the MDGs. That is why the response of the UN Statistical Commission to the request of the World That Counts report and to the call of the Secretary General was to establish the high-level group for partnership coordination and capacity building, because partnership coordination and capacity building is the only way to cope with this challenge. So I think we are on track. I don't think we have solved many problems or many challenges yet, but since we are on track and since we really mean to remain on track, and there is a lot of work behind the scenes going on, not only in building partnerships and in capacity building, but also in designing, let's say, the Cape Town Global Action Plan, which helps us to stay focused and to work on all these challenges, which we really need to channel into a safe track. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we skip to Patty? Can you give us your 60 seconds?
Yes, Madam Chair, I think we shouldn't be terrified by the number of indicators, because anyway, we have to measure those. Highly summarizing them doesn't help us. What we need is to understand that we may have to look at the tip of the iceberg. Underneath that, under the ocean, it's a huge number of indicators, and we should construct that architecture right. Otherwise, if we focus on the few indicators, then we'll skew what we need to measure. So we need to understand that architecture, and therefore there have to be resources underpinning this kind of architecture, out of which we can source the few indicators that the politicians and ourselves can handle. Second, the digital citizen, very important, not only digital in terms of accessing the data, but all of us have to be digitized. It's a scandal that the world is not known. Citizens of this world are not known because they have not been registered. So digitizing at birth, through life to death, is very crucial.
Thank you very much, Paddy. And Stefan, we're going to let you have the last word here.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, when I heard that we have to measure 4 times as many indicators, I thought, great, my budget will be multiplied by 4. Then that didn't quite happen, and I guess many of my colleagues in the national statistical offices had similar experiences. So how do we deal with that situation? We need a little help from our friends, I think, and this is the theme of this forum. I mean, we need to reach out, we need to organize ourselves, we need to work together. And I always say that will have implications for the role of the national statistical offices. In the traditional design, they were a goods provider. They were providing all the data that were relevant for high-level policy decision-making. In the future, I think there will be more of service providers. They will not be providing all the data. They will still provide a significant amount of key data, but there will be also other data, and the service provided by national statistical systems will be to do the data validation, to help understand what kind of data can be used for what purpose. And that service is, I think, will be the result of a complex dialogue, and I think that, as Gabriela said and all said here, that's why we are here. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all very much for setting the scene for us. We're looking forward to an exciting few days, and thank you for all the work that I know you've all put into making this happen. Thank you.